seconds. I mean, 10 minutes.
Yeah, I got the notice. Great. You see it. Okay, the website looks good. And should we start letting people in? Okay.
So, good yontif. Nice to see so many of you early and bright-eyed. There's many of you might remember, well, some of you, the Buddy Hackett. I always think of Buddy Hackett on Yom Kippur because he said that his mother, before Kol Nidre, made him eat 3 matzah balls, and that they were so hard he actually had to eat them like whole, and he never knew why. And then when he started to get hungry about 10 o'clock in the morning, there was an explosion in his stomach. He realized it was the first matzah ball. And at 2 o'clock, the second matzah ball. And at 5 o'clock, the third matzah ball. So if you get hungry at 10 o'clock, I just want you to imagine that you're Buddy Hackett and that you have some spiritual sustenance from this story, if not actual sustenance. So we begin this morning with chanting of Matovu.
Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Yai da da, yai da da da, yai da 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 da.
We continue with the chanting of Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadal veyitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alam Divarach Yirei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayedecho Beit Yisrael ma'agalo v'zman kariv v'meru amen yesh me'Rabbah mevarach Le'alam ul'almei almaya וישתבח, ויפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי קדושה בריחו, לעילה ולעילה, מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בלמה ואמרו amen.
We continue with the chanting of the Baruch Hu, the Shema, and the V'ahavta.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamevorach, Baruch Adonai Hamevorach le'olam va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
You shall love Adonai your God with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Set these words which I command you this day upon your heart. Teach them faithfully to your children. Speak of them in your home and on your way, when you lie down and when you rise up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand. Let them be a symbol before your eyes. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Be mindful of all my mitzvot and do them. Thus you will become holy to your God. I, Adonai, am your God, who brought you out of Egypt to be your God. I, Adonai, your God. We continue with Mi Chamocha.
Mi chamocha b'alim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, oseh pele, nora tehilot, oseh
שיר חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו.
Adonai yimloch l'olam ba'ed. Adonai yimloch l'olam ba'ed. Adonai yimloch l'olam ba'ed. Le'olam, le'olam, le'olam ba'ed.
We continue with the Tefillah. Cantor Robin will chant Adonai Svatai Tiftach.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chaste Avot V'Imahot U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'Neihem V'Ma'an Shemo V'Ahava V'Ma'ancha 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 Elohim Echayim L'Ma'ancha 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 Elohim Echayim Zochreinu L'Chaim Melech Hafetz B'Chaim V'Chotveinu B'Sefer HaChaim L'Ma'ancha Elohim Chaim L'Ma'ancha 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 Elohim Chaim L'Ma'ancha 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 Elohim Chaim Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai Mechaye hakol atah rav lehoshia morid hatal Mechalkel chaim chaim bechesed Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim Somech noflim verofe cholim ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך, מי כמוך, אל הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו, לחיים ברחמים. ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל.
We continue with the chanting of the Unasana Tokef, the piyut, the prayer poem from the Middle Ages, which gives us such a beautiful and vivid imagery of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
ונתן תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא ואיום, ובוא תנשא מלכותך, ויכון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו אמת, אמת, כי אתה הוא דיין ומוכיח, ויודע ועד, וחוטא וסופר ומונה, ותזכור כל הנשכחות, ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ומלאו יקרא, וחותם יד, כל אדם בו.
Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love, your reign is a reign of truth. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal, you record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten. And when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other. And so a great shofar will cry, Tikiyah, a still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, Behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments.
בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. כמה יעבורון, וכמה יבראון, מי יחיה ומי ימות, מי בקיצו ומי לא בקיצו, בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. מי ואש ומי ומים, מי וחרב ומי וחיה, מי ורעב ומי וצמא, מי ורעש ומי ומגפה. בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. מי וחניקה ומי וסקילה, מי ינוח ומי ינוע, מי ישקיט ומי יטורף, מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי יעני ומי יעשיר, מי יושפל ומי ירום.
On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree.
ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירין את רוע הגזרה.
You are everything that we praise you for, slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses. We are but flesh and blood. We who are mortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread, like broken vessels, like withered grass, like a flower that must fade, a shadow moving on, a cloud passing by, mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere, a glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name, and our name you have linked with yours. We continue with the chanting of the Kedusha.
Nikadesh, Nikadesh, Nikadesh et Shimcha. מקדש את שמך בעולם, כי שמך מקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. ככתוב על יד נביאיך, וכרזל זה ואומר.
ובכן תן פחדך אדוני אלוהינו על כל מעשיך, ואימתך על כל מה שבראת, ויראוך כל המעשים, וישתחוו לפניך כל הברואים, ויעשו כולם אגודה אחת לעשות רצונך בלבב שלם, כמו שידענו אדוני אלוהינו, שהשלטן לפניך, עוז בידך גבורה ומינך, ושמך נורא, על כל מה שבראת. ובכן תן כבוד אדוני לעמך, תהילה לרעך, ותקווה טובה לדורשך, ופתחום פה לעמך למלוך. שמחה לארצך, וששון לעירך, שמחה לארצך, וששון וששון לעירך. וצמיחת קרן דוד עבדך, ואריכת נלבן ישי משיחך, במהרה בימינו. ובכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו, וישרים יעלוזו, וחסידים ברינה יגילו. ובכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו, וישרים יעלוזו, וחסידים ברינה יגילו. ועולת תיפוץ פיה, וכל הרשעה כולה כשן תכלה, כי תעביר ממשלת זדון מן הארץ. ותמלוך את אדוני לבדך על כל מעשיך, בהר ציון משכן כבודך, ובירושלים עיר קודשך, ככתוב בדברי קודשך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, ואין אלוה מבלעדיך, ככתוב. ויקבע אדוני צבאות במשפט, והאל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך הקדוש.
We continue with Ritzeh. May our prayers be acceptable before you, O Lord. Let there be peace. Grant goodness, blessing, and grace, constancy, and compassion to us and all Israel, your people. Avinu, bless and unite all human beings in the light of your presence, for your light has shown us a holy path for living, devotion to love, generosity, blessedness, mercy, life, and peace. In your goodness, bless your people Israel with peace at all times. Let us and the whole family of Israel be remembered and inscribed in the book of life. May it be a life of goodness, blessing, and prosperity. May it be a life of peace.
בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר וניכתב לפניך אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים לחיים טובים ולשלום.
We pray silently. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Chonenu vanenu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu, Ki ein banu ma'asim, Aseh imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, Aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed, V'hoshi'enu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu, Ki ein banu ma'asim.
We begin the Torah service now. We'll hear the chanting of Adonai Adonai El Rahum V'Chanun. These are the words in the Torah portion of God speaking to Moses, not allowing Moses to see his face, but to see his back, and these words being said.
Adonai, Adonai, Elohim v'Chanun, Eret ha'payim v'rafesed ve'emet, Noser chesed la'alafim, Noser avon ba'fesha, ve'hata'a
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo. Galul Adonai iti unromama shemo yachtav.
So now Rabbi Ben Newman will introduce this morning's Torah portion.
On Rosh Hashanah, I talked about 3 words that were challenging to me: faith, prayer, and grace. And I presented a reframing of these ideas to make them more accessible. Today, I would like to talk about another word that has presented a challenge for me throughout my life: God. One of my biggest issues with the word God that might resonate for all of you comes from the problem of human suffering. If God is all-powerful and all good, why do the innocent suffer? For me, most of the philosophical arguments put forward by theologians to solve this paradox are woefully inadequate. Over the last 3 years of my working here at Temple Beth Shalom, I've had a chance to study with many of you, from our youngest youngsters to our eldest elders, and I know that this word presents a challenge for many of you as well. And I want to tell you something that one of my teachers said. The God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. I don't literally believe in the prayer that we say on the high holidays that God is sitting on high with a book of life and book of death and determining who will live and who will die. In fact, I believe that it is better to be an atheist than someone who believes that God will solve all our problems. You might say, what kind of rabbi are you to say this? What chutzpah you have to say this? Yes, it is chutzpah, holy chutzpah, as one of my teachers used to say. Martin Buber once said, the atheist staring from their attic window is often nearer to God than the believer caught up in their own false image of God. There's a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. He tells his disciples that atheists can be higher than some believers. When atheists perform good deeds, he explains, they do so not from a religious obligation, but rather out of a sense of inner morality. In times of crisis, he continues, you should never say, I pray that God will help you. Instead, for the moment, you should become an atheist and imagine that there is no God who can help, and say, I will help you. The rabbis commenting on today's Torah portion bring forward an alternative view of God which speaks to me personally, called the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is the presence of God that is in this world. The image of Shekhinah is a presence, a feeling that resides in each one of us. In this Torah portion, there is a strange phrase that most translators gloss over as a scribal error. One translation says, God will bring you together again from all the peoples where God has scattered you. But the word that is being translated as bring you is actually veshav, which means God will return. The translation skips over the problem, but the rabbis in the Talmud do not. The Talmud writes, in every place they were exiled, the Shekhinah went with them. So too, when in the future they will be redeemed, the Shekhinah will be with them. As it is said, then God will return with you. It does not state God will bring back. In other words, God will cause the Jewish people to return, but rather it says God will return, which teaches that the Holy One will return together with them from among the various exiles. The verses in the Torah reading seem to convey that we are the outcasts and God is eternally at the center. But this Talmudic interpretation simplifies the picture. We are outcasts. God is an outcast. We return. God returns with us. God, in the form of Shekhinah, is suffering along with us. The Shekhinah suffers with us, is exiled with us, and when we return, returns with us as well. This is an understanding that envisions God as the presence of holiness inside of each one of us. Just as the Shekhinah is that part of God that suffers alongside of us, Shekhinah is also that part of us that brings truth, beauty, and goodness into a world full of that suffering. When the Kotzker Rebbe was 5 years old, he asked his father, "Where is God?" To which his father answered, "God is everywhere." The young boy then corrected his father, saying, "No, I think God is only where you let God in." When I tell people that I study Jewish mysticism, the Shekhinah, God's presence, they think that it must be obtuse, confusing, and hard to explain. But the truth is that this Jewish mystical view of God isn't mystifying. It is as clear as looking in the mirror at yourself or in the eyes of your neighbor and seeing therein a spark of the divine. As it says in the Torah reading we are about to read, it is not in heaven. No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to do it. On this holy day of Yom Kippur, this day of returning to the spark of the divine that feels the suffering of the world and works to end that suffering by acting to create truth, beauty, and goodness in the world, may we be blessed to see the divine in one another, and most especially in ourselves. Shana Tova.
And now Simon Spencer, the president of our synagogue, will say the blessings over the Torah, and Cantor Robin and members of our synagogue will be chanting the Torah portion.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamavorach La'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach L'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אתם ניצבים היום כולכם לפני אדוני אלוהיכם, ראשיכם שבטיכם, זקניכם ושוטריכם, כל איש ישראל. טפכם נשיכם וגרך אשר בקרב מחנך מחוטי ביצך עד שואב מימך לעוברך בברית אדוני אלוהיך ובעלתו אשר אדוני אלוהיך קורא דמך היום.
למען הקימותך היום לא לעם, והוא יהיה לך אלוהים כאשר דיבר לך, וכאשר נשבע לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב. ולא איתכם לבדכם, אנוכי כורת את הברית הזאת ואת העלה הזאת, כי את אשר ישנו פה עמנו עומד היום לפני אדוני אלוהינו, ואת אשר איננו פה עמנו היום.
כי המצווה הזאת אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לא נפלס היא ממך ולא רחוקה היא, לא בשמיים היא לאמור. מי יעלה לנו השמיימה ויקרא לנו וישמיענו עושה ונעשנה. ולא מעבר לים היא לאמור. מי יעבר לנו אל עבר הים ויקרא לנו וישמיענו עושה ונעשנה. כי קרוב אליך הדבר מאוד, בפיך ובלבבך לעשותו.
ראה נתתי לפניך היום את החיים ואת הטוב, ואת המוות ואת הרע. אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך, ללכת בדרכיו ולשמור מצוותיו וחוקותיו ומשפטיו, וחיית ורבית וברכך אדוני אלוהיך בארץ אשר אתה בשמה לרשתה. ואם יפנה לבבך ולא תשמע, ונידחת והשתחווית לאלוהים אחרים בעבדתם, הגדתי לכם היום כי אבות טוב אדון, לא תאריכון ימים על האדמה, אשר אתה עובר את הירדן לבוא שמה לרשתה. העידותי בכם היום את השמיים ואת הארץ, החיים והמוות נתתי לפניך, הברכה והקללה. ובחרת בחיים, למען תחיה אתה וזרעך, לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך, לשמוע בקולו ולדווקא בו, כי הוא חייך ואורך ימיך, לשבת על האדמה. אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב, לתת להם.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בסכנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, נותן התורה.
Amen. I'd like to thank Andrew Levin and Hope Hollander for chanting once again for us this Yom Kippur morning. Wendy Nadich, Vice President of our synagogue, is going to introduce and read the Haftorah portion for us.
Is this the fast I desire? Undoubtedly, I'm not the only one in this service who has read these words year after year, but never fully considered their meaning. Every year, I look forward to reciting my transgressions, thinking that I could release them for a while. But I know I never heard the call to social action in the Haftorah portion. I think I heard that call 45 years ago at the end of college in Worcester, Massachusetts, when I started as a volunteer and then a staff member working with street kids. I grew up in Great Neck, a wealthy, heavily Jewish community on Long Island, and though I'm sure that there were people there living in poverty, I know it was all the wealth around me that I saw. In Worcester, the kids I worked with all grew up in poverty, and many of the staff I worked with were recovering heroin addicts and Vietnam vets struggling with their experiences. This was a long way from Great Neck. I worked with teens who made money working the streets, and I knew the corners they worked. Took them to doctor's appointments to make sure they got there and were screened for venereal disease. Helped search the floor in their apartments for nickels and dimes so they could buy bread at the nearby bodega that raised its prices when the monthly welfare checks came out. I knew their families and friends and the neighbors who provided refuge when the kids couldn't go home. And on my clients' behalf, I did my best to work with the systems that made it so hard for their families to make ends meet and to help their struggling kids. It was a gift to me that most of the kids I worked with let me into their lives. This closeness to the world around these teens and their families is what convinced me that social work was the place for me to be. The kids' needs went from very basic, such as food and shelter, to access to appropriate school, health, and mental health care in Worcester, and to the big systems of the state and beyond that sometimes helped but often hindered. That was many years ago, but I've carried that experience with me into all of the social work I've done over the years, from family court to runaway and homeless youth services to teaching up-and-coming social workers. As I spent time with Isaiah over the last couple of months, I thought about the contributions my husband Elliot and I have made responding to people's basic needs with donations of money, food, clothes, household items, and the contributions we've made over the years to our community and communities. I know most of you have done these same kinds of things as your circumstances permit. Now I think to myself, so what have you done lately? Is it enough? Is it ever enough, especially given my place of privilege in the world? And it's complicated enough to tend to others' basic needs, but the last year's discourse, from the local to the global, has opened up a whole other realm of poverty, the poverty of spirit, of kindness, of fairness, honesty. How do we take on these things? So can we use this Yom Kippur to take steps towards assertive action as individuals, as a synagogue community, to answer the request, rather, the demand of Isaiah? TBS already holds food, clothing, and other drives throughout the year. We've encouraged people to register and to vote. How can we further the commitment to social justice as a congregation? Our Social Action Committee is just getting started planning for the year ahead. Anyone interested, please join us. Last year, Temple Beth Shalom hosted an interdenominational service for Martin Luther King Day, at which Reverend Emily Brown gave us a Franciscan blessing that, to me, laid out the challenge very clearly. May God bless us with a restless discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may seek truth boldly and love deep within our hearts. May God bless us with anger at the injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we may tirelessly work for justice, freedom, and peace among all people. May God bless us with the gift of tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and transform their pain into joy. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we really can make a difference in this world, so that we can do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice, kindness to all our children and the poor. This is the fast which I believe God desired. This is our challenge. Is it enough to just start, just to take one step, just to be somewhere along the path? But actually, what choice do we have? Blessed are you, our eternal God, supreme power of the universe, who called forth noble prophets to speak the truth. Blessed are you, God of eternity, who delights in the Torah, in Moses, God's servant, in Israel, God's people, and in prophets of truth and right. Cry from the depths, says God. Do not hold back. Lift your voice like the shofar. Tell my people their transgression and the house of Jacob their sin. Yes, they seek me daily, as though eager to learn my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not abandoned God's law. They ask of me the right way, eager for God's nearness. They say, why did we fast and you do not see it? We afflict ourselves and you do not know it. Because even on your fast day, you think only of desire, while oppressing all who work for you. Because your fasting is filled with strife, and with callous fist you strike. No, your fasting day will not lift up your voice before heaven. Is this the fast I desire? A day to afflict body and soul, bowing your head like a reed, covering yourself with sackcloth and ashes? Do you call this a fast, a day worthy of the favor of Adonai? Is not this the fast I desire, to break the bonds of injustice and remove the heavy yoke, to let the oppressed go free, release all those enslaved? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and to take the homeless poor into your home and never neglect your own flesh and blood? Then shall your light burst forth like the dawn, and your wounds shall quickly heal. your righteous one leading the way before you, the presence of Adonai guarding you from behind. Then, when you call, Adonai will answer, and when you cry, will respond, I am here. If you remove the chains of oppression, the menacing hand, the malicious word, if you offer your compassion to the hungry and satisfy the suffering, then shall your light shine through the darkness, and your night become bright as noon. Adonai will guide you always, slake your thirst in parched places, give strength to your bones. You shall be like a well-watered garden, an unfailing spring. Blessed are you, O God eternal, supreme power of the universe, rock of all ages, source of justice in all generations, God in whom faithfulness abides, whose word is deed, whose every utterance bespeaks truth and righteousness. Faithful are you, our God eternal, and faithful your words. Not one of them rings hollow. For yours is a reign of loyalty and compassion. Blessed are you, God of eternity. You are true to your word. Have mercy on Zion, our spiritual home, and through us, hasten your redemption of the downcast and disheartened. Blessed are you, God of eternity, who brings joy to Zion through her sons and daughters.
Thank you, Wendy. And we continue the service now. Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence, and when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong.
Ay, 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 Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazanu, Dibarnu Dofi. Ay, 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 He'evinu v'hirshanu zadnu chamasnu Hafalnu shaker. Ay, 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 Ya'atznu ra, Kisavnu, Latznu, Maratnu, Niatnu. Ay, 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 Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Oref. Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Tainu Titanu.
I continue with the Vidoy, the confession for the 21st century. We confess our sins against the earth. We commit ourselves to saving it. We have assaulted our planet in countless ways. We have blamed others for the spiraling, deepening crisis. We have consumed thoughtlessly and irresponsibly. We have driven myriad species to the point of extinction. We have exhausted irreplaceable resources. We have failed to transcend borders and act unselfishly. We have given in to our many appetites and our gluttony. We have harmed beyond repair the habitats of living beings. We have ignored the signs of change in our climate and our seasons. We have jeopardized the well-being of future generations. We have known the problem, but left problem solving to others. We have lost sight of our role as God's partners in creation. We have mocked, cynically, those who love creatures great and small. We have neglected the environment, most of all in places of poverty. We have overpopulated our cities and overfished our oceans. We have polluted seashore and sky, fertile soil and freshwater springs. We have questioned and doubted solid evidence of danger. We have ravaged the old-growth forests, ecosystems created over centuries. We have spewed poison into the bloodstream of our land, its rivers, lakes, and estuaries. We have transformed dazzling beauty into industrial ugliness. We have used shared resources for personal gain and corporate profit. We have violated the commandment, do not destroy. We have wasted precious treasures, our God-given gifts. We have exploited the weakest and most vulnerable in our midst, and yet we yearn to be better guardians of this earth and the fullness thereof. Let us be zealous now to care for this unique corner of the cosmos, this planet, our sacred home.
Ve'al kulam elo selichot selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu ve'al kulam elo slichot slach lanu mechalanu selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu.
Infinite source of goodness, help us to see the good in ourselves, in others, and in the world around us. Teach us to cultivate a discerning mind to know right from wrong, and a listening heart open to love and forgiveness. Guide us to walk in your ways with integrity, ever faithful to the promises our forebears made. And may your goodness inspire us to do what is just and right.
Amen. תחדשנו לטובה, אמן. היום תכתבנו לחיים טובים, אמן. 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 היום תעשנו אמן. היום תשמע שבתנו, אמן. היום תתמכנו בימין צדקך, אמן. 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 היום תעשנו אמן. 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 היום תעשנו אמן.
So once again, good yantif to all of you. Shana Tova. Oh, so here we are, the morning service of Yom Kippur. Last night, Kol Nidre was your first vaccination against sin and transgression. For those of you who were there, all ages. This morning is your second vaccination. This afternoon is the booster. Now, there's a Talmudic argument about whether you really need it or not, but I would suggest it because if nothing else, it will lighten the sin and transgression. It won't be as severe as if you didn't take it. A story. But which story? Here, as your rabbi, I have to admit that I'm up in the middle of the night, wondering which story I should tell you. A new story? An old story? A story that needs to be repeated? We chanted the V'ahavta before, translated usually as, "You shall teach your children diligently." But my old friend and colleague, Rabbi Jules Harlow, translated Vishinantam Levanecha as, "You shall repeat yourself to your children." You parents out there, when your kids say, "You said it already," it's a mitzvah to repeat yourselves, right there in the Torah. And so we have all of these stories that we repeat year after year, and we pass them on to our children. I want to share two stories with you this morning. The first, it's found within a book entitled In the Days of Simon Stern, written by the late Arthur Cohn. And it's a story within that novel entitled The Last Jew. And it's a futuristic story. It's a time hundreds of years ahead when the Catholic Church has taken over the entire world. The Inquisition has engaged all human beings in one way or another to adopt Catholicism. There are no more Jews, no more Muslims, no more Buddhists, no one of any other religion. And in this story, a Catholic priest has lost his way, has a flat tire, and he's walking along the road and he looks into a home and he sees a man standing there and he's holding up a silver cup and he's lit candles and he has this unusual kind of bread. And he knocks on the door and asks the man what he's doing. And the man doesn't even really know. He said he's been living by himself, separated from the world. and that this is what his parents did before, and so he's doing it now. And the priest realizes that this man must be a Jew, and perhaps the last Jew. So he brings him to Rome before the Inquisition, and they start questioning him, and he doesn't know very much. And so they decide that they're going to take him and incarcerate him and give him books and let him read and learn about the Jewish tradition so that there could be enough evidence to convict him of being a Jew. And after some years, he's brought before the Inquisition, he's asked questions, and he's become very learned, very knowledgeable. And indeed, they declare that this is the last Jew. But what they'd like to do, instead of just sending him into exile or punishing him, is they are going to send him around the world to tell the stories of the Jewish tradition, the history and the laws, to go from city to city so that people all over the world can hear what the last Jew has to teach for this religion, which no longer exists. Year after year, he goes from city to city around the world. People stop by to hear him tell his stories, and they begin to look forward to him coming on his annual tours. And as the years go by, he gets older and older and more frail, and he finally comes to one city, and people are gathered around, and he's in the middle of a story about the Jewish tradition. And in the middle of the story, he takes ill and he dies. And the people are forlorn. They say, we loved his stories. We loved what he taught about the Jewish tradition. Why don't we take up these stories ourselves and tell them to our children? And indeed, they do. And they become the new Jews. And so I share that story with you because that is my hope, that the stories that I share with you are stories that you will share with your family, that you'll share with your children and with your grandchildren. Not a bad way to go in the middle of a story. But as the story goes of a journalist who was interviewing a farmer who was 90 years old, and he asked the farmer, have you been a farmer your whole life? And the farmer answered, not yet. So I would say, not yet, but the middle of the story. And you are to carry on these stories, and I want to share the second story with you. A story which is not my own, the story I read to you last week about Isaac's bar mitzvah, if you remember. Some of you don't believe that I actually bar mitzvahed Isaac. Well, that was a story of imagination. Here is a story that I heard from Elie Wiesel, and a story that was published by Steve Zeitlin in a book entitled Because God Loves Stories, and a story that I find so precious. Wiesel at his best. A story. There was once a Jew who made his living telling Jewish tales. He would travel the countryside of Poland, sharing his stories with whoever might listen, hoping in return to be invited for a meal, or even better, given a kopeck for his efforts. One day, the teller of tales met Israel Baal Shem Tov, the Besht, whom Rabbi Newman mentioned before, the founder of Hasidism. The Besht was already known throughout Eastern Europe for his marvelous stories and for his ability to bring inner peace and joy to his fellow human beings. Moments spent with him, a mere glance from his radiant eyes would relieve even the worst suffering. Poland and Russia were on fire with his religious fervor. The Besht invited the man to spend 6 months with him. Live with me, he said. Watch very closely what I do and who comes to see me. And then you will have enough tales to tell for the rest of your life. And who knows, you too might one day through your stories relieve a man of his suffering and pain. The teller of tales accepted the invitation. Who could turn down the Besht? And after 6 months of observing and listening, he left, overflowing with tales and experiences to share. But again, to his dismay, few wanted to listen. Sometimes at an inn, some fellow who had imbibed too much would listen to a story and offer him a vodka, but times were tough. Now he is traveling through the outermost parts of Poland in search of someone to listen. On a cold winter's night, he arrives at an inn on the Polish border. He goes around trying to tell his tales, but tonight no one, not one soul, is interested. Finally, the innkeeper calls him over. Listen, he says, no one here is interested in you or your tales, but a few miles from here there lives a Polish nobleman who not only loves to hear stories, but will pay you handsomely for each tale he has never heard before. The teller of tales leaves the inn, trudges through the snow on this dark wintry night until he sees a flame in the distance. He walks toward the light, which turns out to be one of the many torches that light up the nobleman's castle so brightly that it appears to be on fire. Here there are guards and sentries, magnificent hallways covered with huge paintings and red velvet curtains. The doorkeeper asks the purpose of his visit. I have a story to tell, he says. The doorkeeper leads him through the castle until they arrive at 2 huge doors, which he flings open. There at the end of a long table sits the nobleman, stone-faced, disinterested, with 2 high stacks of kopecks at either side. The teller of tales sits down and starts telling stories. The nobleman sits unimpressed, unmoved. Every so often, after a tale he had not heard, he pushes over 1 kopeck. The teller of tales reaches for every story he has ever heard, every experience he has ever had. The face of the nobleman doesn't budge, doesn't show the slightest emotion. Finally, the teller of tales has told everything. He knows nothing more. He rises to take leave. But now the nobleman says, "Is that all?" Their eyes meet for the first time. Well, there is one more, just one more. While I was staying with the Baal Shem Tov, a man once came to him very upset. Master of the good name, he said, I was once a Jew, but the outside world beckoned me, its knowledge, its material possessions, its culture. I felt constrained by the Jewish tradition, and in order to partake of it all, I converted and became a Christian. Now I am successful and rich, but also forlorn. I feel I did the wrong thing. What shall I do? And the Besht responded, Don't worry, my son. Just use your good fortune and knowledge to help the poor and the needy. But, the man continued, when will I know I have been forgiven? And the Besht said, you will know you are forgiven when one day a man comes to you and you hear this story told. Now the teller of tales looked up, and a radiance illumined the nobleman's face. Tears flowed down his cheeks as he embraced the man who had set him free. This tale contains so much that is dear to the Jewish tradition. The importance of words, the telling of stories to set mankind free, the waiting, the wandering, the longing for redemption, the concept of a miracle for one human being by another, the belief that somewhere a human being waits and another human being pursues him. They don't even know each other, but when they meet, history will never be the same. And now we'll hear the beautiful chanting of Eloheinu Sheba Shamayim. Our thanks to Irene Steiner for chanting that beautiful prayer. We just take a break now. We have family services that begin at 12 o'clock. They're filled to capacity. They are in person outside under our tent because the rain stopped early this morning. And then at 2 o'clock, Penny Wilson and Joe Lurio will be leading a discussion for those of you who registered. And then we will have our afternoon then service, and then Yisker service and concluding service beginning at 4:30 this afternoon. That's the booster service.